Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 276 in the main event, Israel Adesanya defended his middleweight title against Jared Cannonier, and in the featured fight on the main card of UFC 276, Alex Pereira brutally KO'd Sean Strickland. And it's very rare the day after a title is defended that we already know what's next for a champion, but that is not the case with the middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya. We know the next fight. It will be Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira for the middleweight title, hopefully by the end of the year. I could see this happening in probably October, November, December. And this is a fight that is so compelling. I wanted to make a video about it, and at the end of this video, I'm going to give you an early prediction for Adesanya versus Pereira. So first off, the middleweight division has gotten a little bit stale, and I think it kind of gets a bad rap because when you have a dominant champion, you look at the division, you're like, well, this guy definitely can't beat him. That guy can't beat him. So it kind of makes the division look really bad just because you have a dominant champ. And Adesanya is just so tough to figure out. And I get that his fights haven't been particularly exciting recently. You look back, since he won the title, he had an absolute snooze fest against Yoel Romero. Both guys should be ashamed of themselves. I don't think either guy really won that fight. After that, he went out there and put Paulo Costa's lights out. That was a phenomenal performance, a masterclass against a guy like Paulo Costa. Then after that, he decides to go up and fight Jan Blachowicz, try to become double champion. He loses to Jan Blachowicz, gets outstruck, gets outgrappled. It was a massive power disadvantage and a massive size disadvantage for Adesanya. A lot of people picked Adesanya in this fight. That's how high people are on Adesanya striking. I thought Jan Blachowicz would win this fight, and he did. After that, he had a rematch with Marvin Vettori because Robert Whittaker was injured, had just fought or something like that. Couldn't make it in time. The UFC wanted a title fight on that card, UFC 263. So Marvin Vettori was the next most deserving. Went out there, beat him by decision. Then he finally rematched Robert Whittaker earlier this year, beat him by decision. This was a close fight. I enjoyed this fight. This fight had more action than maybe a Adesanya versus Cannonier fight. But I still thought Adesanya won, but it was your typical jab, leg kick performance. And then, of course, last night against Jared Cannonier, UFC 276, he wins by decision as well. But I really think, having a dominant champion, even though he's not brutally KOing these guys, the fact that he's such a tough puzzle to figure out, I think it makes some of these challengers that come up, like Alex Pereira with the massive backstory that Pereira has, it just makes it a little bit more exciting. And I'm super hyped for this fight, and I think a lot of people are super hyped for this fight because it's been a while, at least in my case, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. It's been a while since I thought Adesanya could lose within the middleweight division. The last time I picked against Adesanya was Paulo Costa, and I was dead wrong there. I didn't think Marvin Vettori had a chance. I didn't think Robert Whittaker was going to win. I didn't think Jared Cannonier had a chance at all. I actually thought that Adesanya would finish Jared Cannonier, and I get it. Adesanya hasn't been super aggressive, and a lot of people have been crapping on the performances. And, when you're fighting the elite of the elite, and when you're the champion, a lot of guys are game planning for you. And maybe it's a little bit tougher. We're not in there, but still, I want an exciting title fight. Or at least, there has to be more activity. In this Adesanya Cannonier fight, both guys were at fault. Neither guy was particularly active in this fight. But I really think in this Alex Pereira fight, it will force Adesanya to be more active. You look at Alex Pereira, the UFC wanted to set this up to begin with. You have the storyline, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the UFC, when they signed him, they had the plan in their head. We are going to fast track him to a middleweight title shot because of the backstory between Pereira and Adesanya. They brought him in at UFC 268 only November of last year. So really about 8-9 months ago was when Alex Pereira had his UFC debut, and now he's getting ready to fight for the middleweight title. He fought Andreas Michailidis at UFC 268. He had some issues in the first round. He got outgrappled, but he was able to, weather that early storm, weather that grappling, defend enough where he didn't get submitted or a ground and pound finish. I mean, he was never in a dire emergency in that first round, but he clearly lost the first round. He got outgrappled. He comes back in the second round, lands a nasty flying knee and just puts him to sleep. Then in his next fight, he fights Bruno Silva. who I get Bruno Silva isn't in the rankings in the middleweight division, but Bruno Silva is a very good fighter, and this was a competitive fight, but I had Alex Pereira winning this fight as well, and Bruno Silva is very dangerous in the striking as well as the grappling. Pereira showed some decent takedown defense in this fight. I believe he got taken down a couple times and was able to pop back up. And then, obviously, after that fight, and I thought this was going to happen, the UFC took a look at the rankings, and they decided who is the best top 10 matchup for Alex Pereira. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the top 10, who does Alex Pereira have the most likely chance of defeating? And I think they looked at some of these contenders and they said, Sean Strickland's the guy. He's not a particularly dynamic striker, and he's not a guy that's going to go out and try to take you down and control you on the ground and just out-grapple you for an entire fight. Marvin Vettori is not going to be a good matchup for Pereira. Pereira may be able to defeat Marvin Vettori, but there's a much larger percentage chance that Vettori goes out there, pushes him against the cage, drags him to the ground, beats him up, maybe he gasses out and possibly gets beat. Robert Whittaker, similar scenario if they were to match him up against Alex Pereira. But they saw Sean Strickland. They said, Sean Strickland, he's primarily a striker. He's not particularly dynamic. He's a great fighter, and, he's been known to have decent wrestling and jiu-jitsu, but he hasn't really showcased it too much. We've seen it against Uriah Hall a little bit, but he doesn't use it too much, and he's just crazy enough where he'll hear, this guy's an elite level kickboxer, and he'll go out there and strike with him, which is exactly why I picked Pereira by TKO in this fight. And sure enough, Sean Strickland went out there, got a little bit too comfortable in the feet. He did not prioritize the takedowns. And he said, you know what? I'm going to go out there and strike with Pereira. And what did Pereira do to him? Hit him with a nasty left hook, hurt him badly, then finished him off with a right hand. I mean, what a statement performance by Pereira. A lot of people were kind of crapping on the Bruno Silva performance. I didn't think it was terrible, but it did show that, he wasn't this absolute monster that nobody could beat, because the Bruno Silva fight was very competitive. But now he goes out there and shuts Sean Strickland lights out, which is a massive win on one of the biggest cards of the year. And now it sets up Pereira versus Adesanya, which I'm personally just super excited for this fight. And I get it. Again, I'm going to mention Adesanya hasn't had the most, craziest performance, the most entertaining performances. But this Pereira matchup, I am pumped for this matchup. First off, you have the amazing backstory. You have the fact that Alex Pereira has defeated Israel Adesanya in kickboxing. And, I get it. That's kickboxing. That was a while ago. But the fact that Alex Pereira has a KO win over Israel Adesanya in kickboxing means something. The fact that Pereira has a decision win over Adesanya in kickboxing, that means something. And you have two guys, Adesanya and Pereira, who are both elite level strikers. And I don't think that Adesanya is going to be able to get by going out there and playing this super conservative game plan, because Pereira has a very long reach as well. He's super tall. He's super lanky. He's an elite level striker as well. And I think there is a chance that he goes out there and he's going to make Adesanya fight a different fight. Typically, you look at Adesanya's opponents, none of these guys, they're all well-rounded in MMA. But Adesanya comes from that kickboxing background where he's just such an elite level striker. He's good at defending takedowns. And so it's just really hard to beat him when you have guys that are just pretty good strikers and they're also pretty good grapplers, and they just can't get the takedown on Adesanya, and they have trouble finding the range because of the feints, because of the footwork of Adesanya. Pereira, that's not the case with Pereira. He is going to go out there. He has amazing striking. He has the death touch in all his limbs. He has a variety of attacks. He's going to match the reach of Adesanya. And this is going to be an amazing matchup. And I think he's going to make Adesanya have to fight with a little bit more urgency, because Adesanya typically just hangs back and waits to counter guys. Pereira can do the same thing. He can sit there, leg kick and jab as well, and look to eke out a decision if he wants to. Now, I don't think that's what's going to happen, because I think when this fight goes down, I think Pereira is going to come in and he's going to throw some good volume from range, and he's going to be able to win some rounds against Adesanya, and Adesanya is going to have to be a little bit more aggressive, and it's going to be a crazy fight, because this is the first time when you have a dominant champion. This is the first time in a while I believe a lot of people are going to be picking the challenger against Israel Adesanya. The striking, the death touch, the fact that he has 2 wins over him previously. I think that's what makes this fight so exciting. And, just looking at this matchup, it's really tough to pick because Pereira just looks like an absolute killer. But I think it's a little bit of recency bias because you look at Pereira and he had that brutal flying knee KO over Andreas Michailidis. He has that brutal KO over Sean Strickland that just happened at UFC 276. And then you see Adesanya, who's been a decision machine lately. And you're like, I'm going with Alex Pereira because of the power. And, I get that. That's a little bit of recency bias. But honestly, Adesanya, I don't know if he's just become complacent as champion. And now he just thinks he's better than everyone. He said, he even said in the lead up at UFC 276, go watch those fights. I was winning those fights. Well, I believe not only has Adesanya got better, I think Alex Pereira has gotten much better since those fights. And I don't think Adesanya is going to be able to go out there and out-grapple Alex Pereira. There's a chance he might shoot it on a takedown. And Adesanya has decent wrestling when it comes to takedown defense. But Pereira has shown good enough takedown defense that unless you get a guy that just has elite level grappling, that I don't think Adesanya is going to be able to take him down. Maybe if he does, I think Pereira will work his way right back to his feet. And I think Adesanya versus Pereira will be a striking match. And as far as an early prediction, again, I know I just talked about it. I think a lot of people are picking Alex Pereira because of recency bias. But I have to go with Alex Pereira. The guy's power is nasty. I think he can hang, striking with Adesanya from range. I think he has a great variety of attacks. Even in the Bruno Silva fight, he looked a little bit tired in the 3rd round, but that was a very high-paced fight where he had to defend takedowns, where he was taken down, he had to work back to his feet. And I think another training camp under his belt, for Sean Strickland, and then another training camp under his belt for Adesanya. I think he will come in with 5-round cardio. And I don't think Adesanya is going to try to push the grappling. I think he's going to try to play that game that he typically plays where he tries to outpoint you from range. And I think Pereira is going to force him by winning some exchanges at range for Adesanya to be a little bit more aggressive if he wants to hold on to his middleweight belt. And I'm going to go Alex Pereira. Touch of death. The power of Alex Pereira. I think Izzy, he's been clipped. He doesn't get hit a lot. But look at the Kelvin Gastelum fight. When Kelvin Gastelum just said, you know what, I'm going to absorb some shots to land some shots, he landed some good shots on Izzy. Robert Whittaker was able to land a couple shots on Izzy when he was rushing forward. And I think Pereira, with his good striking defense, I think he will pick his moments, and I think he will be able to find the chin of Adesanya, and he doesn't need to do it many times. Adesanya has great footwork. He has good striking defense. He has good head movement. But I don't think you can hang around with a guy like Pereira for 5 rounds trying to outpoint him and not get caught with one of those left hooks, like he put Sean Strickland out so cold. I think Pereira's the guy to get the job done. When we get closer to the fight, I'm going to go back, rewatch some footage, and I'm going to do a full breakdown and prediction. I can't promise you my pick won't change. But I am so excited for Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, and we should get it before the end of 2022. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Who do you think is going to win, Israel Adesanya or Alex Pereira? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.